Welcome to Students Over Systems. I'm your host, Jenny Gentles. At Students Over Systems, we talk with the creators, advocates, and beneficiaries of education freedom. On today's episode, we're celebrating National School Choice Week with a discussion about universal education freedom programs. For this important discussion, we're joined by former Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, who's now the CEO of Citizens for Free Enterprise. Governor Ducey served 2 terms as the 23rd governor of Arizona, starting in 2014. He has served as chairman of the Republican Governors Association and Arizona State Treasurer. And before entering public service, he was partner and chief executive officer at Cold Stone Creamery. Columnist George Will described Governor Ducey as the most successful 21st century governor, and school choice advocates describe him as the pioneer of the gold standard of education freedom. Governor Ducey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jenny, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year and happy National School Choice Week. So Arizona is sometimes described as the Wild West of school choice, and I don't think that's necessarily a pejorative. Would you agree with that characterization?
I certainly believe that Arizona has been the most innovative state on school choice. You know, Arizona is the youngest state in the lower 48. We were the last to be admitted to the Union in 1912. 73% of our adults here in Arizona were born somewhere else. So people move to a place where they believe life will be better. I think most Americans can see that K-12 education throughout the nation is failing. So they're open-minded to new and good ideas. And Arizona and my administration certainly took advantage of that.
Well, we have been thrilled to watch what's going on in Arizona over many decades. You launched the charter school law back in 1994. There's been tax credit programs since, I believe, 1997. We're going to talk a lot about the Empowerment Scholarship Account program today. The public perception is that you maybe, or Corey DeAngelis, created ESAs in 2022, but that program, the ESA program, was actually created back in 2011. What inspired you to expand the program to universal eligibility?
Well, there's a lot of credit that can go around on ESAs, and we were able to get a lot done there. I wish we would have renamed them educational savings accounts, because I think that acronym helps explain what the account is doing. And it's basically a scholarship of your taxpayer dollars back to the parents, allowing them to make the choice to the school or mode of education of their choice. And they are the ones that make the final decision. That no one loves their child more than the parent. And they also, we know that different kids learn in different ways. I know that as a father of 3 sons, and this gives you the option on where your child should go to school. You mentioned 1994, and I was blessed to serve 8 years, a winning election in 2014. So I was not there in 1994. But I stand on the shoulders of heroes like Lisa Graham Keegan, who was the superintendent of public instruction, and then Governor Fife Symington, who signed among the country's first charter laws. Now, since we've been able to pass universal ESAs in Arizona, you see these dominoes falling across the country, and that's wonderful. But I would encourage any governor that cares about education, and every governor should, because it's the top investment line in every state budget, to begin with these ideas of choice, of charters, of what Arizona had in 2011, which were ESAs for special needs kids, for foster kids, for kids on Native American nation residences. And oftentimes that's a way to get good policy to move forward. People look at that, they see that it's working, and then Americans love fairness and they want to embrace it, and they say, why isn't that available for everyone? And we were able to take advantage of that in my final year as governor with the universal ESA program.
Let's back up a little bit. Just before that 2022 universal expansion, you were doing some innovative things with federal COVID funding because schools weren't doing the right thing by students in Arizona, and they certainly weren't in Virginia, where I lived, and public schools were closed for a year and a half. Can you talk a little bit about how you were using education freedom as a leverage to inspire public schools to serve students better?
Certainly. I learned a long time ago in new governor school that when there's a crisis, you will see the best of human nature and you will see the worst of human nature. And we certainly saw some of the worst of human nature in the way some of these teacher union leaders behaved during COVID. They believed that the definition of leadership was lockdown. They had no evidence that this was spreading in our schools or affecting our children. Yet so many of our public K-12 districts locked down. And remote learning is not good for our kids, and especially not good for our kids of challenging means. Oftentimes they don't have screens or Wi-Fi available in the house, and they certainly don't have multiple screens if there's multiple children. So these kids really fell behind. I gave some credit before to leaders in Arizona that came before me, but the real credit that I give on the inception of this idea was Milton Friedman in his Free to Choose series. He talked about vouchers. I used the word scholarship, but he talked about this actually reforming K-12 education and bringing entrepreneurial energy to what happens. And we passed ESAs in 2017, believe it or not. It was referred to the ballot. You can refer a law that the legislature passes and the governor signs to the ballot in Arizona if you get enough signatures. And we were crushed. We lost 65 to 35. And I huddled my team together and other school choice advocates and said, we need to do a better job communicating the benefit of school choice, the benefit of these scholarships. Then the crisis came. And Friedman said, in a crisis, people will look for the ideas that are lying around. We passed universal school choice whole hog for every parent and family in the state. The parents had seen the lack of instruction and rigor and accountability during COVID, and they were much more open-minded to choice and innovation. The opposition wasn't even able to achieve the signatures to get on the ballot. And Arizona became the first state in the nation to accomplish universal school choice. Since then, 9 other states have followed suit. Tennessee and Texas are on the 1 yard line to do this. So this is something that should be an expectation of every parent in this nation. It's truly the way to reform K-12 education. I think it's a way to renew our nation because it brings parents and communities together in benefit of their children. So I often say for people that are my age or older, there was a man named Roger Bannister, and he was the first person to ever break the 4-minute mile barrier. People didn't think it was possible for a human to run a 4-minute mile. Well, since Roger Bannister did that, thousands have followed. It was more of a mental block. And I think we had much of this type of thinking or dissonance around school choice. People didn't think that it would be possible to pass this universally. But now that we've done it in Arizona, these other states have followed. I think that we're going to have every state in this nation eventually participating in this. And it's going to be the renewal that we need for K-12. We know that K-12 has been flatlining since the 80s, and it's been declining dramatically since 2007. So this can be what brings it back, what allows our kids to learn something of value in math, reading, science, American civics, character formation, what allows Catholic schools to be revived and Christian and Hebrew schools along with a classical education. So we're going to see a real race, and we're going to see a 1,000 flowers bloom in the future around these ESA programs.
Well, you certainly established Arizona as the gold standard of educational freedom with what you did in 2022. And I've heard you give a lot of credit to legislators in Arizona, the state legislators that helped make sure that that legislation passed. And I've also heard you give credit to the parents who were set to benefit from the ESA program, who stood up to the teachers' unions and the opponents and ensured that the opponents did not get enough signatures to get it on the ballot. So you give the credit to the legislators and to the parents. But let's talk a little bit about the role of governors, because I think that those 10 or so other governors looked to you and saw it as a possibility when they hadn't thought that before. And then I also think that governors tend to be pretty competitive people. So they're looking to compete with each other and then also ensure that their education systems are competitive. What role do you see as the governors playing in this process?
Well, the governor's the leader. The governor's the chief executive, and they're the spokesperson and the salesperson for new policy and better ideas. And I have given a lot of credit out there, and I think that's important. This is not a red state idea. We only have a 1-seat majority in our House and in our Senate. I was blessed with a great Speaker of the House in Ben Toma and a great President of the Senate in Karen Fann. But the real MVP outside of elected leader or policymaker was a lady named Janelle Wood. And Janelle was the leader of the Black Mothers Forum, who came to see me in the summer of 2020. And Janelle wasn't very happy with me because she didn't like the way that I was handling the George Floyd riots. I called out the National Guard. I had an 8 p.m. curfew, and Janelle didn't feel that her coalition could use their voice. And I let her know that they could use their voice until 8 p.m. peacefully, and then everyone could get a good night's sleep. Janelle said, "Governor, I wish we could find something we could agree on." And through discussions, we landed on school choice. And it was Janelle Wood and the African-American pastors in the state of Arizona who sat next to me in my final State of the State, next to the First Lady, Angela Ducey. And I said from the podium that 50 years ago, politicians stood in the schoolhouse door and wouldn't let minorities in. Today, union-backed politicians stand in the schoolhouse door and won't let minorities out. These kids are trapped in failing public schools. It's time to set these families free. It was Janelle Wood who led the standing ovation and the African-American pastors who helped whip the votes. Not one of them a Republican. And we were able to pass this in the final month of my second term. It took all 8 years to get it done. So I really do think it's important to point out the other heroes and leaders and unsung in this movement, because you need the Corey DeAngelises, you need the lady here who was so motivated and refused to sign, to make sure that when people were signing these things in front of Fry's and Albertsons, those are the Krogers of the West, that they knew what they were signing. And people refused. They refused to sign. School choices in full bloom. We have nearly 100,000 families, but it did take that broad coalition, and it took persistence to get it done. I want to point out, we failed in 2017. We were rejected and then widely accepted in what seemed to be the blink of an eye in terms of public policy. So this is a time for change in our nation. I think that we have the better ideas if we will properly present them and communicate them, and then get into these small rooms, get into these rural counties and make the case and answer the questions and win the argument. Then you win the vote.
Well, I believe Janelle's going to be speaking or leading an event at the nation's capital during this week, National School Choice Week. So she's taken the Arizona success story on the road and making sure that parents across the nation are aware that it's possible to have these options. So many people across the nation are looking at Arizona and states like Florida that also had an existing ESA program that became universally eligible. And they're viewing you all as models. I've heard you talk about the importance of accountability, transparency, and how the money's spent, fidelity to what you promised with the program. What do you think your state needs to be doing to establish an effective model for other states?
I think this is critical, Jenny, that everyone that has success in getting this done, you can take the afternoon and celebrate the accomplishment. But what's most important now is that this is successful. And if you think about it, in terms of opposition, to change and improvement in K-12 education, it's been the government unions that have stopped that. This is the biggest defeat that they've had in a century. And in politics, there is always an equal and opposite reaction. So our success here on the number one investment line in every state budget is going to call out a response. You've probably seen the new Democrat governor in Arizona call for the abolition of ESAs. They want to undo it. They want to defund it. Now, we need to make sure that it's widely popular, which it has been in Arizona. Every time you read an article that says that ESAs are over budget in Arizona, the translation is they're just very popular. More people want ESAs than even we could have imagined. Once we get those dollars to the parents, the politicians will never be able to take that away. The best place for accountability is with the parent. The parent knows if their child is being challenged. They also know if their child has a certain unique situation, if they're being bullied, if they made some kind of mistake over the internet and need a fresh start. This allows them to take their child where they need to go, up to and including, like I said, these religious schools, but also homeschooling and tutoring. So it really puts the parent in charge of this. Transparency's got to be around the taxpayer dollar, which is the parent's dollar, on where it's being spent. And of course, you see this happen all the time in the larger districts. There's always someone, or oftentimes someone, who's making bad spending decisions. We want to make sure we put guardrails and transparencies around where those dollars are spent. And then the fidelity around this is improvement in K-12 education. Somehow we got the bad idea with the right intention in the 1980s that every child would matriculate out of K-12 into university or college. And we see through student debt with degrees that haven't happened that this is not working. And when I was in high school, there was a class called SHOP. And that's where a lot of people found their purpose. They turned it into a passion and eventually a paycheck. And many of those folks are our most successful small business entrepreneurs. So we don't want to make one path of education superior to others. We want the child and the parent to be able to pursue happiness. And 65 to 70% of the jobs that are available in Arizona right now are in career and technical education. The smartest guy in my graduating college class, the guy we all thought would grow up to be senator or governor, who went after university to a competitive law school, came back to Arizona to build his practice, called me up my second year in office and said, "Hey, I've got an idea for you. Shut down the law schools. We don't need any more lawyers in Arizona. We need a damn plumber in Yavapai County." And these plumbers and tradesmen actually come out of school with a certificate that allows them to make more money than first-year lawyers. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. And this idea of school choice is really the umbrella that will allow this to happen. And that's the fidelity to this actually coming to life and being successful. It's not just about passing it in a legislature, it's what it can actually do in people's lives.
Right. Well, it's exciting when you look at charter schools, which are thriving in Arizona, that have different areas of focus and might send children down this path to certification as part of their high school experience and then give them more opportunities. So we are talking and focusing about the ESA program. But the school choice environment that you've created there in Arizona has a wide array of options with the scholarship program, the ESA program, charter schools, and other options in the state. Let's talk a little bit more about the opponents of all those options and freedom and exciting futures for students. You mentioned the education budget is a top line item in many state budgets, and I've heard you say that it's at least 50% of a state budget. And that is a big reason why the unions get really involved. You're talking a lot of power and control, which is what unions like when you're talking about that percentage of the state budget. So, who are these opponents of school choice in Arizona and beyond? And how do we push back on their relentless attacks and on the attacks of union controlled politicians like Governor Hobbs?
If you include universities, education is over 50% in Arizona. And I believe it's over 50% in all 50 states if you include universities. K-12 is hovering around 50% in each state. So there's no comparison at the federal level. If you want to talk the defense of our nation and our United States military or entitlements, this is as big as it gets at the state level in terms of investment. So you can count that the other side and the opposition is going to want to hit back. They were shocked and surprised. I think they thought because they were able to crush us in 2017 that we wouldn't take another run at this in 2020. And if we did, they would be able to beat us. But right now we are winning and they are defeated. But there are no lost causes in public policy because there are no gained causes. The opponent has a vote as well. And I would say it's the government unions, specifically the teachers' unions. Now, not the teachers. I'm going to tell you, we have an incredible amount of phenomenal, heroic teachers in the state of Arizona. I work to get our teachers a 20% raise to their paycheck. We put $11.7 billion additional dollars into K-12 education, more than any other state in the nation, where it could have a return on investment. And that's an improvement in math, reading, science, American civics, history, and character development for our kids. But it's these government-backed unions that are the opposition. They're putting a lot of misinformation out there. They're not being successful, but I know that they are not going to stop. There is no substitute for a governor with willpower who believes in this idea. Once you pass it, it is about expanding it, promoting it, and protecting it, and making sure, like I said, that you have the accountability, transparency, and fidelity. But just know that the other side is not going to stop on this. I actually believe that we can win Democrats over on this. The only reason we don't have Democrat state legislators here is because of fear of the government union. You saw Josh Shapiro, a Democrat attorney general, run for governor successfully in Pennsylvania on this platform. And he wanted to expand school choice and ESAs. He got spanked by the teachers union temporarily. And I think once you have parents, once you have Janelle Woods and African-American parents and parents of every stripe and background going to their legislators and saying, why isn't this available in Chicago, in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania, you name the large metropolitan area? This is most beneficial to our kids that are trapped in failing schools, and this is there to help everyone. So it really is, it's rare that we can be on the side of the better idea that is having success around the nation. And we don't have to talk about it as an idea now. We can point to all kinds of examples of success, of innovation. It was Janelle Wood who led on micro schools because in her district, the public schools would not open. So leaders, soccer moms in those areas found homes where they could bring kids from the neighborhood in. They would hire a super teacher, pay her very well, and it was like a one-room schoolhouse. And they would master certain concepts and allow kids to go with the ability of their ability to progress. And then you would also have what was essentially one-on-one tutoring, because the teachers have a very tough job. And the tough job is not teaching the smart kids in the class. The kids that get it can move on and do the work. It's the kids that are confused or that they don't understand. And when they can have that type of what is the equivalent to one-on-one tutoring, it's magical. And it makes a huge difference. So if somebody doesn't get to 5th or 6th grade and say, well, I'm no good at math and that's not for me because they were stumped by a concept that they missed the days from, or their screen wasn't working. And that's where this school choice, innovation, and reward for the teachers who are the heroes in the classroom, in addition to the parents, can really change things for the better in our country.
It is exciting to see how school choice and education freedom can benefit educators as well. Of course, you have to have teachers at these private schools and other education options. So we want to provide those options for teachers to thrive and to just continue to love what they do. All right, our last question on Students Over Systems is always, what is the school choice myth that bothers you the most and that you'd like to tackle today?
There's two things I would want to say about this. One, the beauty of school choice is, of course, a union is able to exist. It's a free country. But many of our good teachers have been under the thumb of these unions. They have been bullies, and they have used certain tactics to scare these teachers. With school choice, these teachers have been set free. And not only the parent can find the place where their child can thrive, so can these excellent teachers. And that's wonderful. And I think the biggest myth around school choice, and there's many myths, but this is to support rich and wealthy parents. Rich and wealthy parents that want their children to be in a school already have them there. School choice is for the child that's trapped in the failing public school, the parent that for whatever reason doesn't like where they are and wants to explore different options. And I think we need to make sure that we're sharpening those arguments. We need to make sure that we're pointing to parents that have taken advantage of this, and that this should be available to everyone. I don't think the opposition is going to stop here. I think they will point out whatever flaws happen. So I think that it's also important that governors and legislators remain vigilant, that whatever they need to do around this policy to improve and expand it, to be responsive and to address that. When we passed this in 2017, it was only going to go to 5,000 students a year for 6 years. We would have built a coalition of 30,000 students. We would have learned a lot. We would have been able to make adjustments that were necessary. By the time we got to 2020, this passed universally. So it's available. We're talking about tens of thousands of families and likely over 100,000 families this year. We want to make sure that we're vigilant on it, that we make whatever adjustments are necessary. And I think we want to say to our friends of goodwill on the other side of the aisle that want kids to get a good education and parents to have these choices and to see improvements in these scores, and ultimately the human flourishing that comes with an education that allows you to go out in the world and make a difference and build a family and be a participant and a leader in your community. That's really what we're doing here, is we're building citizens. And I think that school choice and things like the first law that we passed in Arizona, the American Civics Act, are a way for us to refresh and reignite those ideas. They needn't be partisan ideas. These are things most families, most communities will embrace. And this was what I'm counting on my peer governors to carry on the mission in doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Governor Doug Ducey, for joining me today and for all that you do to champion school choice and ensure that students receive the education that they deserve.
Thank you, Ginny. The pleasure was mine.
We hope listeners found today's conversation informative and encouraging. If you enjoyed this episode of Students Over Systems, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to share this episode with your friends. To learn more about the work of the IWF Education Freedom Center, please go to iwf.org/EFC. Thank you for listening to Students Over Systems. Until next time, keep celebrating education freedom and brighter futures.